details for you. This webinar is being recorded right now, and within 2 weeks you will receive a link to the recording so that you can watch it again if you wish. A personalized certificate and a virtual goodie bag. I would like to thank Pearson for inviting me to be part of this splendid program and this fantastic lineup of speakers. And thank you all for attending this talk today. Well, we're going to talk about how we can use future skills to unlock our young learners' potential. And those of us who are of a certain age know how dramatically life has changed. And this is much thanks to technology over the past 20 years and over the past 50 years. Life has become much more international, multicultural, and interconnected. And how well we know that right now, this webinar is being watched by people all over the world. And this is really impressive. I mean, if you come to think of it, there are people in Turkey, in Indonesia, in Latin America, watching this webinar. So what happens with all this is that we need very different skills right now from those we needed in the 20th century. And the educational institutions and we teachers have a critical role to play in developing these skills. Therefore, it is not surprising that we're constantly listening to people talking about 21st century skills or future skills. Now, what do we mean when we speak about 21st century skills or future skills? Now, there is no widely accepted, let's say, definition of what 21st century skills are. But in general terms, it is widely accepted that they can be grouped into 4 broad categories. First 2 categories would be ways of thinking, which include creativity and innovation, critical thinking and problem solving, decision making, and metacognition, learning to learn. Also, the second one includes communication, that is, ways of working includes communication and collaboration. The other 2 categories are tools for working, which include information literacy, ICT literacy, citizenship, both at local and global level, and skills for living in the world, that is life and career, and personal and social responsibility. Now, to prepare children for the modern world, STEAM learning has become an essential part of education. And why do I say STEAM and not STEM? Many a times we hear that STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, and maths, are essential in education and are essential knowledge areas our students need to develop. I rather go for STEAM, which includes the A of art, because I believe, and not only me, but there are several people, but I firmly believe that the arts need to be part of education. So besides introducing our children at different ages to STEAM learning, we also need to introduce them to what we call the 4 C's. And the 4 C's are how to communicate, collaborate, think critically, and think creatively. So, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creative thinking, the 4 C's. These skills are essential to success, not just in school, but also in life. They help us build function skills such as planning, organizing, choosing strategies. They help children develop self-regulation, working memory, and cognitive flexibility. and they will encourage them to learn new ideas and develop their social, emotional capabilities. Now, let's have a look at these forces a little bit in detail. Yes? So, we are going to start with communication and collaboration. Both these two C's promote confidence. Developing communication skills through fun and collaborative methods fosters a sense of self-esteem, also enables healthy emotional development and encourages teamwork. Mm. Uh, with communication, we have, for example, listening, speaking, storytelling, sharing thoughts and ideas are all communication skills. As we know, I mean, those of us who have children know because we see it in our children or we saw it when they were small. And you can see it if you're teaching kindergarten, for example, when they are little ones, really little ones, they learn through listening to others, to hearing stories. They imitate languages they hear. For example, I have a little granddaughter who is 2.5 years old, and she's growing up multilingual. Why? Her mother is Argentinian, her father is Brazilian, and she's educated in English in kindergarten. So she's growing multilingual. Children learn through imitating body language, facial expression, learn to make eye contact with others, and they gain an understanding of themselves and the world around them through communication. So, strong early communication skills are directly related to their literacy success because developing strong patterns of verbal and non-verbal communication also foster positive self-esteem and social skills. Now, uh, what about collaboration? Collaboration is how children begin to build friendships with others. Young children initially watch others, what they do, what they say, and eventually share time and play together. Mm. As they get older, they become aware of other children's feelings and ideas, and they are motivated by acceptance, and they learn, sorry, to respect others, make compromises, and appreciate each other's perspectives and skills when they are engaged in collaborative activities. Uh, Learning these skills early has the benefit of supporting positive interpersonal relationships. Now, collaboration is enhanced through a combination of pair work, group work, games, project-based activities, things they have to do as a group or in pairs, sharing time with peers. And also, we need to bear in mind children thrive well when they feel valued, not just by adults, but also by peers. Uh, Now, what uh, evidence do we have? What are the expected outcomes, right? Uh, Through communication, children articulate thoughts and ideas effectively using oral, written, and non-verbal communication skills in a variety of forms and contexts. They listen effectively to decipher meaning, including knowledge, values, attitudes, intentions. They use communication for a range of purposes. We tend to think that communication is just speaking to somebody else. No, it's much more than that. So it's of course, using communication to instruct, to inform, but also to motivate and to persuade. For example, when children are working in groups and one of the group members um, is finding it difficult to do a piece of work or to express an idea, and you see that they start helping each other, they start motivating the one who is finding it difficult, they're motivating him to speak. This is also communication. It is a way of solving communication breakdowns that indicates good communication skills and also social skills. They use multiple media and technologies. That is, not just doing, for example, creating a poster on paper, right? But also using video, their own use of technology, coming up with different ways of using different media. And they also communicate effectively in diverse environments, including a multilingual environment. Mm. Now, as regards collaboration, uh, what evidence do we have that they are developing well in this respect? They can take personal responsibility for their contribution to a group task. They participate in a group task, they share their ideas freely, they also offer explanations for their contributions, and they are able to listen to each other's contributions. Also, they work towards a resolution related to a task. These may include evaluating multiple solutions and points of view during a group activity, recognizing the most suitable solution for the resolution of the task, even if it is not the solution they have offered. Also, managing the sharing of tasks in a project. Having the ability to identify tasks and subtasks, the steps required to carry out a task to arrive at a final product, and to share these tasks fairly among the group members. And also listening, and this is so important, listening respectfully to each other, uh, responding constructively to others' contributions, acknowledging other people's views, even when these views conflict with their own. Mm. Listening carefully, showing that they are listening carefully. All these features are really very, very important outcomes that we want our students to show. Now, the third C I would like to mention here is creativity. Now, creativity is a really complex concept, which can be defined as the ability to generate multiple and original ideas. Many people think that being creative is being good at painting or drawing or creating music. Not just that. I am terrible at creating music, and well, I am not that bad at painting, but I mean, I know Picasso. But I think I am creating in other fields. So it's creativity can be can come up, can manifest itself in many different ways. So uh, some of the attributes of creative thinking include divergent thinking, imagination, cognitive flexibility, uh, very important, tolerance of ambiguity, motivation, intrinsic motivation. Um, Creativity provides a very healthy emotional outlet. Children who can express themselves creatively show less frustration and develop a joy of learning. Mm. And they are able, children are able of expressing creative thoughts and feelings through many activities, not just painting or drawing, but writing, drama, dance, movement, scientific exploration. Creativity, as I say, can be expressed in many, many forms. Mm. And part of creativity, and this is really important, is learning to innovate. Innovation with children is how they test their thinking and how they interact with their world. As I said, children start by imitating observed behaviors. But then they begin to innovate using ideas or solutions of their own if the typical approach doesn't work. Now, what are some of the desired outcomes? For example, using newly created content to solve problems. They they have learned some content and they use this content to create a new one, and apply it in a different way. Then making decisions that promote the development of creative skills, uh, creating new contents from their own ideas or other resources, and participating in creative activities. For example, today Jean Perret mentioned a new series, Now I Know, in which she participated, and I co-wrote Level 4. And last year, I had the opportunity to go to Latin America to do a tour of Now I Know. So I could have a look at all the levels of the series. And there you can have a look at different creative activities. That is, in Now I Know, you will find constant opportunities for communication and collaboration and for creative responses from students. For example, uh, there is one activity that I remember um, after reading a unit on exploration. This is what students have to do. They have to imagine they are an explorer in the past, mm, and they have to work with a partner and they have to describe their journey. And then they are going to tell the class about the journey. And there are some guiding questions. For example, how did you travel? Where did you go? What happened during the journey? How did you feel? So these questions will provide some scaffolding, mm, so that they have this support in order to develop their ideas. And then, once they have created all this, they can even create a movie after that. I mean, not just tell each other, they can come up with all sorts of different things. Just imagine what it might be for a child to imagine that they are a traveler, an explorer from the past, or maybe an explorer into the future. Mm. Um, then we have then critical thinking. Now, critical thinking refers to the higher levels of thinking that learners need to enable them to think effectively and rationally about what they want to do and what they believe is the best way to do things. It consists of identifying links between ideas, analyzing points of view, evaluating arguments, supporting evidence, reasoning, making conclusions. It is, to sum up, it's thinking in a non-linear, open-ended way. That is, think of critical thinking as something that goes like this. It's not linear from A to B. No, it can go anywhere. And open-ended, allowing for multiple responses and specified answers. These unspecified answers may not be known even by the teacher. Hmm? Has it ever happened to you? I'm sure it has, that you present a question to be discussed by the students, and suddenly one of the students comes up with an idea that initially it may look really crazy, and then giving it a second thought, it's brilliant. Or it is something unexpected but logical. Mm. So allowing for various perspectives and interpretations. And whenever I think of this, I remember a teacher of mine at university. She taught a subject, a seminar about Shakespeare. And I remember that when I sat for the exam, we had to prepare a paper and defend this paper. And I was looking at morality in Shakespeare, of course. I love to get into trouble. And one of my hypotheses was that if Shakespeare hadn't killed Mercutio, Mercutio would have stolen Juliet from Romeo. I remember how this teacher laughed when I said that, and she said, "Oh my God, why do you say that?" And I said, "But Mrs. Stephens, I mean, you're an intelligent woman. Who, being an intelligent woman, would go with Romeo, who is just a pretty face, instead of going with Mercutio, who is so intelligent, so witty?" And I had to prove it with the text, and I did. So I remember the other teachers on the panel were like, "Oh my God, what is she saying?" But then, I mean, it was a really crazy idea, but it was what I thought. So accepting different perspectives, different interpretations is part of the critical thinking, considering an issue from various perspectives and looking at and challenging assumptions and exploring possible alternatives. Now, um, oh, not yet. Now, thinking is not a natural function like sleeping, walking, talking. Thinking needs to be developed. And people do not necessarily become wiser as they become older. Some children are lucky because they grow up in a nurturing environment. They learn important thinking skills from their parents, from the surrounding adults. But other children are less lucky as they don't have such a nurturing environment. So both children will profit significantly from teaching methods that take the development of their thinking skills really seriously, and that's where we come in as teachers. Mm. When learners get used to systematically applying their thinking skills, they will go through positive learning experiences and they will gradually learn to enjoy more challenging tasks. Now, in the specific case of English, it will help if they approach ideas in a thoughtful way. By encouraging a more cognitive approach, critical and creative thinking training should help stimulate discussion of ideas in the classroom. And it will encourage learners to think about how the language works and how it is used. Now, I was I'm going to show you a five-step model to move students towards creative and critical thinking, including, of course, communication and collaboration all together. This five-step framework can be applied, can be implemented in any teaching or training setting to move students from uh, let's say, a traditional, rather static way of teaching towards critical thinking. And in here, if that is, if you have the opportunity to look at Now I Know, at any of the levels of Now I Know, you will see that it follows these five steps. First of all, uh, determine the learning objectives. Of course, we identify this is something we do all the time when we're preparing our lessons. We determine what the learning objectives of the lesson are and the behaviors we want our students to exhibit as a result of their learning. Right? Good. Then we move to the second step. In the second step, we introduce and model a new concept, right? And we prompt the students to think critically and creatively about it. How? Assigning 5-minute activities, simple activities that they can complete individually. For example, completing a sentence, but not any sentence. For example, suppose 100 years ago, buildings And they have to complete the sentences in as many ways as possible. Or the biggest problem for sea animals is these are ideas taken from now I know level 4. I mean, things that occurred to me while I was preparing the unit. I mean, a topic of sea animals. Okay, we start the lesson with this. The biggest problem for sea animals is complete the sentence with as many possibilities you can think of. Also, definitions, for example. Ask students to define a key term. For example, they can provide the meaning, examples, synonyms, antonyms, depending on the word, right? For example, in a unit about recycling, we are having a lesson about recycling. And we say, okay, we have hypothermia, or the three R's. R. What do you think are these three R's? Okay, and we have to provide a definition. Problem solving. A simple problem solving activity that will take them just 5 minutes related to the lesson and the objectives. Um, Asking them to list different ways in which a problem could be solved. For example, you are sailing with three other people and see a storm coming. The boat is about 500 meters from the coast. What do you do? Problem solving. Uh, for example, clustering. Take an important concept related to the lesson and write it in the center of a piece of paper and ask them to create as many personal connections to it as they can. For example, you write the word home in the middle of the poster or the blackboard, as you wish, and you circle it. And around that, they write what they think home is, ideas, words. Um, Modeling. You give them a concept related to the lesson, and they have to represent the concept visually. It could be a sketch, a diagram, a symbol, anything, whatever. It's their interpretation of the concept. Questioning. For example, asking them to write 5 questions about the topic you are going to deal with in the lesson, and perhaps choose the most interesting one. And also, one activity that I find very, very interesting at the beginning of the lesson, because it serves a double purpose. Not just starting them to think critically about the topic, but also it serves as assessment. It's the KWL. I'm sure you are familiar with it. It's KWL. K stands for what I know, or I think I know. W, what I want to learn, and L, what I have learned. So at the beginning of the lesson, you can create on a poster, you can create a table with the 3 columns, K, W, L. So learners say what they know or they think they know about the topic or the concept. In the second, in the W column, they write questions they would like to find the answer to in the lesson. And you put this poster aside, leave it for the end of the lesson, and when you have finished the lesson, before going out, you bring it back to the front of the classroom and you ask the learners to look at the questions and think of what they have learned in this lesson. How many questions were answered? Could they answer all the questions? Which are the most interesting questions? And also employ questioning techniques. And this is Socratic questions. I'm going to come back to Socratic questioning later on. Step 3, choosing activities that promote active learning. Um, and again, assign activities that students can complete. let's see, simulations, experimentations, rehearsing, all these are active learning activities. Then, prompting, communication, and collaboration. These, for example, you have the 5-minute activities, have them turn to a classmate or in a small group, they share their ideas like a think, pair, share activity. First, they think about the concept individually, then they pair up with a partner, they share their ideas, and then they work as a group. Think, pair, share. Then this helps children or students, because this can be used with all ages depending on the materials you're working with. They in this way they have to think critically and creatively about the concept, and then share with the other person, with a partner, share with the group, discuss, accept different points of view, defend their point of view. Then you can, for example, the activities can be something very simple, dramatizing, asking them to share the ideas with the group and choosing the most out there, the craziest idea, and they have to say why, summarizing what the group has come up with. Reviewing, refining, and improving. This is really interesting. While these students are doing the activities, there are different ways in which they can review what they have done, refine it, and improve it. One of these possibilities is self-recording. That is, they record themselves doing the activity, and then they watch the recording, they watch themselves doing the activity, and think about ways in which they could improve the activity, the strong and weak points of their performance, and how they can improve it for the next time. And then you can collect feedback from the students. This is important because this feedback from the students helps you inform your teaching, your lesson plan, your planning, your future remedial work if necessary, and explain the students why they are doing this. Learners need to know why they are doing things. So explain them what benefit they will get from it, what is the advantage of doing these things. Um, then when you have learners presenting their work, uh, they present their work in many different ways. Yes, depending on the type of work they are doing, it may be just simple answers to an exercise. It may be a piece of a project, a presentation, having a spokesperson in a group exchanging ideas or presenting their ideas to the rest of the class. You provide feedback, but not just you provide feedback, but also the rest of the groups who can provide feedback, or the other pairs can provide feedback. For example, suppose that learners are discussing a topic, suppose animals. How can people in their city or in their region, what actions they can take to help the environment and to protect the local fauna? All right. They have done their discussion, they have come up with ideas, they present their ideas, and the other groups listen to these ideas, ask questions, and also provide feedback on the acceptability, suitability of their ideas. They can question. And as I said, create opportunities for self-assessment by video recording. Another way of self-assessment could be, for example, in group work, assign one group member, or for example, the group members decide who of them is going to take notes of, for example, how much each group member has interacted. Give them a checklist of things to look for, behaviors that you want to observe, and then they can discuss within the group what has been the behaviors that have been observed. It's important, if you are using the scribe, as I call it, to make it clear to students that this student is not acting as a group policeman, but rather picking the things that they need to perhaps improve, right? And of course, all this feedback that you receive, all this feedback that students give each other will inform your lesson plan for the following class. So this is a possibility. I mentioned Socratic questioning in step 2, and asking good questions is one of the key elements in helping students develop critical thinking skills. And Socratic questioning is an effective way to explore ideas in depth. Today, Jean spoke about, let's say, big questions and small questions. All kinds of questions are important, big questions as well as small questions. But when you use Socratic questioning, I would call them these big questions. You are promoting independent thinking and giving them ownership of what they are learning. Yes, I'm sure that we all ask these types of questions. I'm going to give you some examples, and you will see. How do we use Socratic questioning? First of all, let's plan the questions we are going to ask. I read somewhere that during a 60-minute class, we teachers tend to ask more than 150 questions. That's a lot. So let's plan significant questions. Let's plan the questions we really want our students to think about, reflect upon, and come up with answers for. Use wait time. This is something that sometimes we forget to do. We ask a question and we say, you. Oh, I think that there are very few questions we can answer automatically. What's your name? Annie. Okay. But there are other questions that need some reflection. So let's use some wait time. At least allow 30 seconds for students to respond. Follow up on students' responses. So Jen said that, for example, small questions are good for starting a conversation. So follow up on their responses with big questions. Also ask probing questions and periodically summarize the key points that have been discussed, especially when they are talking freely about a subject, about a topic. Yes? Draw as many students as possible into the discussion, because some of them are shy and don't want to take part, and some others are lazy. They see that everybody's working, so they sit down and relax. So try to draw as many as possible into the discussion, and let the students discover knowledge on their own. Sometimes we tend to spoon feed our students. So now let them discover things on their own. What are the types of Socratic questioning? Oh, this is a very, let's say, academic name for the questions that we ask in classroom. For example, clarification questions. What do you mean by? Could you put that in another way? Can you give me an example of what you have just said? Can you explain that a little bit more? Yes? Or questions about an initial question. Hmm? So you say, is this question easy or difficult? Hmm? Why do you say that? Why do you think so? Hmm? Assumption questions. Hmm? For example, uh, you say, why would someone make this assumption here? Why would you make this assumption? Um, Reason and evidence. Oops, sorry. Reason and evidence. What would be an example of what you say? Why do you think this is true? Or could you explain that? Hmm? Can you give me a reason for that? The origin or source questions. Hmm? Is this your idea or did you hear it from someone else? Hmm? Have you always felt in this way? Where did you get that idea? Hmm? Implications and consequences. Yes? Now, what effect would that have? If that happened, what would the consequence be? Is there an alternative to that? Hmm? Why? Hmm? Why? That's a lovely question. Viewpoint questions. Hmm? For example, how are, suppose that you are discussing different ideas, you say, okay, how are this and that idea different or similar? Hmm? What is the alternative here? Why would other groups of people respond to this question in this particular way? You can adapt, of course, these questions to the age group you are teaching. But you see, those WH questions are very rich in that they are asking learners to reflect and think and beyond the obvious. Now, having said all this, you probably think that the four C's apply to high level classes. And to some extent, you would be right, as people need to understand the information in front of them before they think critically about it and respond creatively to it. But four C's habits should begin at an early stage. When you design activities for lower level students, or when you use your course book, you can improve sometimes the activities with your own questions that develop critical thinking. So you need to provide more scaffolding and ask yourself, what support are you giving in the activity? Can you give support in different ways to cater for different learning styles? Now, there are lots of activities that we do in class uh, every day that foster creative, critical thinking. Of course, communication and collaboration goes without saying. But sometimes we don't perceive them as being so important because we are very used to doing these activities. So, for example, making comparisons, categorizing sequences. Sequences are really important in developing children's thinking skills, and this is something that you start doing in kindergarten. Um, Categories, placing different things in categories. Again, you can start from kindergarten well into mm, university, if you will allow me. Memorizing, exploring numbers, time, space, making associations, analyzing cause and effect, making decisions, think, pair, share, as I said. All these activities are activities that we do in the classroom. And sometimes we take them for granted. We say, okay, yes, this is something that I do every day. Right, let's give it a twist. Now, I'm going to show you some examples. Um, for example, here, we have a math problem. Yes, this is in one of the levels of one of the early levels of Now I Know. Sarah and Joel are going to school. Their mom gives them two lunch boxes. She gives Joel three sandwiches and one apple. She gives Sarah four sandwiches and two apples. How many sandwiches do Sarah and Joel have in total? How many apples? Okay, so This is a very simple math problem. But then you can add some questions. Once the students have finished doing this, say, okay, when do you use your math skills? Because students, children, and students, teenage students, I have seen that myself in my own teenage students, they, they have sort of airtight compartments in their brain. This is math, this is history, this is geography, this is language, and this is English. And sometimes you ask them a question like this and say, teacher, this is English, yes, and what? You have learned this in history, in geography, in math. Apply it to the English lesson. They don't seem to find the connection between the boxes, so we have to explain what connections they can make, how to make the connections. So, when do you use your math skills? Think about that. What do you count every day? When do you add or subtract? So here you're adding a critical thinking, creative thinking component to an existing problem solving activity. Mhm. Um, Another one. For example, suppose that we have a lesson on measurements, right? That is, we are teaching our students how to speak about measurements, and we have a typical um, how long is the bridge, how deep, how high, how tall, how far, how wide, etc. And the corresponding structure. It is 244 meters long. It is 3,500 meters deep, etc. Okay, right. So this is a typical activity. How can we improve this activity and have a follow-up? Let's see. We have this table. So we have the place and structure, and we have tall, far, long, deep, wide, and old. Right? They have already worked with these structures in the typical way. But now they have to choose 3 places or structures in your city or in your country, and they have to find information and make notes about this information. Mhm. Then they pair up with a partner and they ask and answer questions with a friend about the places or structures using how far, etc., etc., etc. And they have to complete the chart. They write the name of the structure and then the information they have found, depending on what it is. Suppose if they are in Kuala Lumpur, they are students in Kuala Lumpur, and they say, okay, how tall are the Petronas? So they write Petronas and uh, they write the measurements, and they have to use the structure. This is a very simple activity for a low-level group of students, but it moves from the traditional how far, how wide, etc. type of activity to something they have to create in a way. They have to transfer the knowledge, the linguistic knowledge they have acquired, and they have to use it in a real life, if you wish, activity, asking about places. Mhm. Analogies. Analogies provide opportunities to learn important critical thinking skills. For example, concepts such as part and whole, vocabulary, categories, opposites, functions, similarities and differences. When children see the relationships between things through analogies, they can build on that knowledge and learn more about those things. They can discover new ways to use things. For example, how many uses can you give a broomstick besides sweeping the floor? Mhm. So, using the broomstick as a horse, for example, Mhm. Or to fly. uh, make broader comparisons between things, and this can help expand their creativity. One activity that I like to give students of all ages, in fact, because I have done this with adult students in company classes, giving them a series of objects. For example, take it was, I remember the last time it was a bar of soap, a hanger, a brick, a pillow, and an umbrella. And they had, in groups, to find as many uses as possible for those objects, but there was a condition. The uses had to be possible. I mean, if I give them a carpet, they cannot say that they are going to fly in their carpet like Aladdin, because that is not possible. That is fiction. So they had to be possible real uses, things that you could actually do with these objects. So uh, it's something that you can do, these analogies you can do with students of all ages, and it fosters creativity and critical thinking. It's and finding analogies is a fun way to teach children to think outside the box. For example, using real objects to show what is alike and unlike about them. For example, a beach ball and an apple. Very low level children can do this. And they can express themselves and you can help them scaffold the activity, but it's developing their creative critical thinking skills. Making a list of similarities and differences. For example, writing a list on the chalkboard comparing an apartment building and a house. Writing the definition of items to discover common features. For example, writing the definition for ocean and lake and finding the common features. Or drawing pictures of items to see similarities and differences. A cat and a dog. As simple as that. I'll show you one here, for example. Children have been working with shapes. This is again a low-level activity. And they have learned about rectangles, circles, triangles, square, etc. And they have this here, this house, and the text, this is my house. Can you see the shapes? The door is a rectangle. We have a rectangle here. What color is the door? It's red, in case you don't see it. The windows are rectangles. And there are triangles on the roof. Not the house. Okay, so then they can go on a shape hunt. I like to ride my bike into a playground. I can see lots of shapes and colors. The slide is yellow. I can see red and blue. I can see a triangle and a circle. Now, if your learners go to the playground, ask them what shapes they can find in the playground. And for example, they can talk with a friend later on, thinking about their neighborhood and speaking about the colors and the shapes that they can see there. So they have, again, they have to find the analogies. For example, a tree can be a rectangle and a circle, right? One thing I love doing with students is using graphic organizers. For example, Venn diagrams. Venn diagrams are wonderful not only for making associations but also for classifying. This way, for example, we have students are talking about camping and they have to group the things that they take camping. So we have things that go inside a tent, things that go outside a tent, and things that go in both, can go both outside and inside the tent. You can do this, for example, with animals. You can have animals that live in the sea, animals that live in water, animals that live in the air. And they can find the common features in the common areas, right? And then they can think and write more things that they can take when they go camping, and they write them in the correct area of the Venn diagram. is very simple. And then we have mind maps for a story, for example. They are reading a story about, Robin Hood. Hmm? And they begin to learn about what characters are, what the plot is, the place where the action takes place. And so they have to complete, they can be doing this as a very guided activity like this one, and then progress into using this sort of mind map to analyze a longer, more complex piece of reading. So mind maps are wonderful for this. And one last activity I would like to show you is cause and effect. Mm. Here, for example, we have students working with the weather. Mm. They have learned about different kinds of weather. They have learned what tenses to use with the weather when we are talking about the weather. What's the weather like today? What the weather is going to be like tomorrow? Is it going to rain? Oh God! So once they have finished with that, let's pose a challenge. So think about the weather in your country and discuss it with a friend. For example, what's the weather like in your country? Very simple question. But then, is it normally like this at this time of the year? Maybe not. Has the weather in your country changed in recent years? How? Hmm? Why are the summers warmer than just a few years ago? Do you think humans are to blame for global warming? Why or why not? That is, you can take a simple activity on the weather a step further. Hmm? So, um, just one final thought about designing tasks to encourage thinking. Remove restrictions from the activities and let students express themselves. Another option is to add restrictions to activities. Because when you add a restriction, then they have to come up with creative solutions for these restrictions. Choose interesting things and materials. You know what your students like, you know what they are like, so choose things that they can be interested in. Use your own imagination and fantasy and let them use their own. And use classroom formats that encourage thinking and sharing of ideas, communication, collaboration, group work, pair work, drama, all those things. Well, I would like to share with you some useful references, a couple of useful references. Creativity in the Language Classroom by Alan Maley and Nick Peachy. This is a free book that you can download, and it's really useful. It's really, really useful. And this paper, Where We Have Been, Where Are We Going, on creativity, which is also a very interesting article, right? Okay, and of course, here you have my email address and my blog,